Great. Thank you so much, Lois and Brianna, and thank you to our presenters today. Thanks to everybody for joining us. Just a couple quick business meeting style things. I just wanted to remind everyone that the Open Research Discussion Group listserv, the SIMPA listserv, is no longer up and running. And so we have a new community in ALA Connect, and I would love for you all to join our ALA Connect community. It's open to anyone. So that's where that and the DSS community page that's where we will promote our future events and share links to recordings and other things. So I highly recommend signing up for that. You can set it up to digest or to send you digest emails, or you can get things in real time. So it's entirely up to you. If you have any problems or questions about that, don't hesitate to let me know. I also wanted to welcome our new, so I am the continuing convener. Brianna is our outgoing convener. I think she's convener for like 12 more hours. So I'm going to be continuing, and then Sarah Jones is going to be the other co-convener, the new co-convener for 2021 through 2023. So I would like to welcome her to the group, although she's not here today, unfortunately, but you'll be seeing more of her if you attend our events in the future. That's all I have.
All right, thank you, Sarah. And I just wanted to reflect a little bit on what we have done over the past year. So the model has really been for these interest groups, and for ours in particular, the Open Research Interest Group or Discussion Group. Sorry, that's the old model for ACRL, Discussion Group. We have tried to make sure that we are getting out there and highlighting the amazing work that's happening. And a lot of it is, projects that folks are trying, case studies at, individual institutions. So we were really pleased when we put out our call to have some amazing folks respond and want to share their ideas. And it's especially nice to be able to provide space and working with ACRL. Lois, we love you. You always come through for us and helping us with this infrastructure and getting everything set up, where we can just share out, through lightning talks, through full sessions, and have an open Q&A and have this great flow of information about such a new and emerging area. So we hosted in January Agile Skunks, Interdisciplinary Collaboration in Support of Digital Research by Reed Bohm and Taylor Davis Van Atta. And in March, we hosted Introduction to the Scholarly Communication Notebook by Josh Bollock, Will Cross, who's here today, and Maria Bond. And now we're really excited to be able to host some lightning talks, which are in conjunction with this very brief business meeting, which we're supposed to have as, part of being in the ACRL structure. But I want to say that although I'm leaving, I'm no longer going to be a co-convener for this group. I anticipate that there will still be open calls that are going to be coming out from this group and from other discussion groups. And it's really lovely to see folks who are engaged in wanting to share ideas, wanting to learn from one another. I think that's a really valuable aspect of certainly the communities that are really thinking about open research. So I would invite you in the chat if you have specific ideas for what you want to learn more about, or maybe what you want to share from your own experience and perspective. That's something that Sarah and I, for the next 12 hours at least, we'll make sure that we have that noted, because we really want to actively be soliciting the needs and wants to help drive and shape this community. And we're all part of so many different communities too. So we've chosen to try to keep this sort of lightweight. We have a list that folks can post to. We're trying to host different programs and events that people can attend and learn from. But certainly if there's more interest in having more structure, that's something that we can create together. So we would love to hear any ideas that you have, again, in the chat. And with that, I'm very excited to be able to pass things over to Michelle Brannon, who's going to be sharing about the Open Sandbox, sharing tools, engaging researchers, and building community. We have Michelle's talk first, and then we'll have another lightning talk after. So I would say, Michelle, if you want to take about 15 minutes, you can go a little bit over that, and then directly following your talk, we'll take some questions for about 5 minutes or so, and then transition over to our next talk. So feel free to be thinking through those questions that you want to ask Michelle. You can start to populate those in the chat, and Sarah and I are going to be moderating that and helping to bring those to Michelle when she's done. And then we'll transition over to our next lightning talk. So with that, Michelle, if you want to start sharing your screen, that would be great.
Great, thank you so much. Let me share my screen over here. All right, so I'm very excited to get to talk to you today. My name is Michelle Brannon, and I'm from the University of Tennessee Libraries. And I'm going to share with you some information about sort of a newish outreach initiative we are calling the Open Sandbox. So let me jump here to my slides. So this is our group, the Scholars Collaborative, and we are really a group of information specialists, and we consult and collaborate with members of our UT community who are engaged in research, creative work, and teaching. Part of our group includes the studio, which is our media and design lab. And so you can see we have an array, everything from scholarly communication to our design folks to our GIS folks. So we're a good bunch of people with a kind of a diverse group that we work with. Some of our folks work more with graduate students and faculty, and some of our folks work more with undergraduate students. So we kind of spread the range there. In the Open Sandbox came about from in the summer of 2019. Rachel Caldwell, our scholarly communication librarian, and Christopher Aker, our data curation librarian, had the idea to create a series of hands-on workshops, not workshops where we're demoing something so much as workshops where we are playing together using data and exploring open research tools. And so we developed it, we called it the Open Sandbox, and we planned for a couple of presentations starting that fall. We had a few goals in mind. We wanted to foster community among researchers across disciplines to help connect researchers who are doing similar things, but maybe working in different, departments of the university. So we're always finding the library, of course, a great place to make those connections for faculty. And we wanted to really target faculty and graduate students, but we have the program open to anyone. And we have had undergraduate students attend. And we also wanted to promote the use of open research tools. To us, that was something really important because we have a lot of workshops around a lot of tools in the library, but we're really wanting some initiatives to focus on open. And we have initiatives that focus on open publishing and open education resources and things like that. But we didn't really have anything that was really focusing on open source tools used for research. So, and then lastly, we have a fairly large library, more than 50 librarians and well over 100 staff. So we wanted the opportunity also for people within the libraries to be able to develop skills, to be part of a group sharing about how they're using open source tools, and also to help foster kind of understanding of what our program is about and what we're doing in our department. And then we also opened a new place called Experience Point. It also happened to open in the fall of 2019. And it's came from a proposal from our esports team to partner with the library to develop a space for the esports program. And it's really a high-end computer lab classroom and with very capable computers. We've got a game design program coming online at UT, and we've got other initiatives. So there's some courses that are able to use this space. And we thought our program would be first a great use of the space in terms of promoting it to the people who attend, to know you can schedule your class, you can use these resources with your groups as well. but also because of the nature of our workshops, we wanted to be hands-on. So we're able to work with our desktop support team to pre-install the software we need and sample data files to work with as we're working through these workshops. So we thought it was a great way to kind of exploit that new space and share it with the public. So our first two programs went off great in the fall of 2019. We had a program about the Open Science Framework and a program about QGIS. QGIS was the most popular program. We've had it twice and it's been the most popular program each time. And it gets a huge range of people from diverse departments across our campus. So there's a lot of interest in GIS work from everyone from forestry, of course, geography, but even business students, communication students, and marketing students were attending the GIS. And so those went really well. And we had, I think we had 23 people at one and 17 at the other. So I thought they went really well. Let's see. In spring 2020, we planned our 2 workshops for March. And of course, everybody knows what happened in March. So at the very last minute, our workshops got scrapped. And we just sort of didn't reschedule them because it was all chaotic in March and April, and it was towards the end of this semester. And so we just sort of scrapped it for that spring. I'm sure a lot of you all had plans that spring that also got scrapped. So we had to shift to online. So in the summer, we started thinking about what that shift would look like. And the biggest thing that really changed was the advanced planning, because instead of working with our IT person to install software, you know, in the lab, we had to communicate with the people who registered to attend to make sure they knew where to go to install software with enough time to reach back out if they had any issues and get assistance. And then we also needed a way to share the files. So for instance, when Eric Arnold did the QGIS workshop, he downloaded specific sheet files, data files to layer into the program. For instance, he downloaded OpenStreetMaps data to use. Well, OpenStreetMaps data is like global, right? And he wanted just an area within Knoxville. And so he custom, created the clipping of that and created a custom data file so that the people wouldn't have to download like huge amounts of data to work with for this project. And so we just created a Google Drive folder, shared it with everybody who was in attendance. And we really worked with our marketing program to make sure that we got the word out to faculty and graduate students and undergraduates through multiple venues. And so that was really important. And so we expanded and included an additional workshop in the 2020 to 2021 year. We invited Meredith Hale, our metadata librarian, to present on Open Refine, a tool she uses a lot in her work, and actually made a great connection with an English professor who's working with a graduate certificate in digital humanities and a project she's working on. So these are the sessions we presented virtually this year. They went really well. In fact, the QGIS and Hockey Trust had very large attendance online, more attendance online. The 2 we did in person, we had graduate students and undergraduate students and a lot of library employees, but we didn't have any faculty, but we had faculty at every one of the online sessions. So we didn't do a formal assessment, but I did chat with some of the faculty that I knew who attended sessions and asked them about that. In other programming we did over the year, we were hearing from students that they preferred in-person programming, particularly undergraduate students. But what we heard from the faculty in this was that online made them able to do it from with less disruption to their work, right? They didn't have to stop everything, get over to the library, attend a session, get back to their office. They were able to just sort of pause their work, attend the session online, and then get back to their work. So it definitely is something to think about in the future. But all of these went very well as online sessions. I will say the one issue is for the QGIS in particular, that's pretty computer intensive, and so some people had streaming issues during that while they were trying to run the QGIS software and attend the Zoom meeting. And so of course we encouraged everyone to do cameras off and things like that, but that was the one issue we ran into. And I think it was more about the computing capacity of their personal laptops and things that they were working on. Several people did chime in on that one, that they wish they had thought to attend the Zoom on their phone and do the QGIS on their screen, because it was hard to watch Eric do a step and then jump into the QGIS software and do a step if you didn't have double monitors. And so that was another concern and another thing that we learned. But it's really just the start of a program. We had 2 requests to come to a class after doing these workshops and kind of repeat a workshop for a specific course. We've had consultation requests from a graduate student group working on a project, but also a faculty member working on a research project for additional training and consultation and the use of the tools. And we've had a lot of inquiries after saying, I attended this. Do you all also do a workshop on this, right? So on something else. And so that's been really a good outcome, I think, for a program that's so new. We are considering doing a hybrid delivery. The esports room, of course, esports is a like online streaming competition type thing. So it's all set up for streaming in that room. So we're thinking about doing hybrid, as we think it might still encourage faculty attendance. But that's where we are. We're in the planning stages, planning what workshops we're going to do in the next year. And our hope is to, we are inviting a couple of faculty members from outside the libraries that we know are using some open source research tools, to invite them to be part of this and present on the tool they're using as well, and talk about how they're using it in their work. So we're hoping to expand this beyond the libraries, and hoping that it really becomes a community of people interested in exploring these tools across the university. So that's what I wanted to present on. It's a new program, and I thought it was really fun and creative way to kind of feature and promote open research tools. And so I would love to take your questions.
Thanks so much, Michelle. This was a wonderful presentation. We have some questions queued up already in the chat, which I will read for everyone. So if anyone's not in the chat, they can hear. Micah asked, have you offered any of these asynchronously or have plans to?
We have not done that yet. We did talk about recording them so that people can attend later. We also talked about instead of doing just a recording, doing something a little bit more interactive with our online instruction librarians and instructional designers. So doing something more where they're step-by-step kind of working through some of the projects, but we haven't gotten there yet. So far, we're planning kind of hybrid workshops for this next time and considering that first step of recording them.
Another question is, did you have helpers for tech issues that arose during the sessions?
Yes, so we definitely did, and we did it amongst our group. So most often I was the tech helper, and so like for the QGIS, Eric and I walked through the project, his sample project ahead of time, so that I would be prepared. And when we did the one in person, of course, I just sort of you know, sat at a workstation, kind of working through the steps and kind of looking around the room when people needed help, and just kind of walked over to make sure they didn't get too behind in the presentation. When we did it online, that was a little bit trickier because you couldn't have, you know, you couldn't just go over and see what the problem was. So I tried to stay on chat and ask people if they were having technical problems to jump in on chat. And I tried to kind of talk them through the issues. Fortunately, we didn't have, it was more of the, hold on a second, my thing is going really slow and GIS is, you know, still spinning, trying to do that thing. So it was more of a processing power than technical issues of people getting lost. But helpers, I would definitely say for some of these are really helpful.
And the last question that we have so far in the chat, any ideas for developing a community or cohort of regulars connected to the Sandbox or the Experience Lab?
Yeah, so there are a few things happening already on campus with that. So there's a digital humanities community of scholars and some groups like that. So those are groups we've been targeting to attend some of these. So far this hasn't kind of led to a bigger group, but that's what we're hoping to do, is that it sort of starts to build a community of people who are regularly engaged with our group and can also help connect us to other researchers that they know. So that's our hope, but we don't have formal plans to do this. We are targeting specific groups on campus that we know are already working in these communities. Are the workshops limited to UTK folks since they're open resources? Have you thought about advertising more widely? That's a good question. We thought about it for these online ones this past year. We did limit it to UTK mostly because we were having a lot of, I'm sure everybody was, but UT was having a lot of issues with the Zoom bombing things and a lot of hate speech in the Zoom bombing things happening with classes. And so they were really trying to limit us to people with the SSO login and things like that. So we did not do that this past time, but we have talked about when we go to a hybrid approach and have it in the experience point, opening it up. And I would imagine a group like this would be a good group to send it to, but also, you know, the target is not so much like all of us. We would probably know about most of these tools, right? But it's like, how do you get to the faculty in anthropology who need to know about that tool? That's the hard part. The library folks are all like, yes, sign me up.
Are there any other questions for Michelle? You can also feel free to unmute if you'd like and verbally ask the question.
I will say that there was somebody in a graduate student in forestry working on a project who attended a session who ended up connecting with an English professor interested in a similar sort of research process. And so then they've talked outside, you know, so it is able to help form those, you know, programs like this are able to help form those connections among faculty and graduate students across disciplines. But man, it's hard to get them to come.
I have a question, and you may have touched on this on one of your first slides, but so is the Scholars Collaborative, is that a department?
Yes, so we are a department within the library, and we also run a service point, the studio, out of our department.
And so are only folks that are part of that department the people who are doing the workshops and the other programs, or have you started to, you know, have conversations about maybe other folks in the library who have skills and knowledge of open tools? Could they participate in some of the programming?
We definitely have it. We want to encourage people outside of our program to participate, not only outside of our department within the libraries, but outside of the libraries as well. So yeah, this past spring, Meredith Hill, our metadata librarian, she's not in our department, she's up in digital initiatives, but she presented on Open Refine, and we've had some interest from some folks in the liaison programs on presenting as well. Many times people come and say, I would love to present on this, and the tool they want to present on is not an open source tool. So we say, that's not great for this. Maybe one of our Thoughtful Thursdays or one of these other programs would be a good venue, but this one, we're specifically focused on open source tools. And so that's become a limitation. The other request we've had, interesting though, is for people who say, I don't have one that's like a whole tool I could do a 30-minute workshop on, but I have this very tiny tool. Could you do a lightning talk version where we could talk about like the draw IO or something like that for a much shorter thing? So that's another thought we're having.
Very cool. Yeah, thank you again for sharing. This is really exciting work. Any
I
other
see, that's
questions?
great. I see that comment about the Peer Scholars Program, recruiting postdocs and grad students to give workshops. That's a really good idea. We have had a lot of graduate students in attendance, so that might be a great way to go. Well, thank you all so much.
All right. Thank you, Michelle. Okay, so we have another lightning talk up next from our colleagues at North Carolina State University Libraries. So they will be presenting on facilitating open text analysis research through the Open Incubator. As you can see, the slides that are being shared right now. So folks presenting will be Scott Bailey, Will Cross, Kelsey Dufresne, and Micah Vandegrift, the real one. All right, I'll hand it off to y'all to start.
Thanks so much. And for those that were here a couple minutes early, Will is here and lurking in the background, but won't be saying anything. He's here for moral support as our fearless leader. And Will and I and our colleague Erica Hayes conceptualize this open incubator program. So that's the Will's connection. So we're gonna just introduce the program briefly. Kelsey and Scott will give some examples of the text analysis version of this program that we ran in December of last year, and then we'll have some time for questions. Thank you all for listening. So the concept of the open incubator, and you can see here, this is the abstract, the idea that we put out, is that we wanted to create a program, a way for a cohort of research development thing that happened regularly at our library that was different than workshops and different than project work, something where we would be together with people learning and doing stuff. We ran 2 versions of the open incubator in previous years, shifted really quickly to online because of the pandemic. And then in our 3rd cohort, which was December, we introduced this idea of having a topical focus. So the first 2 were general calls, tell us what you're interested in doing, join us, we'll talk about some open topics that might relate to any general research project. And then in December of last year, we said, all right, we want text analysis research projects, and we're going to reframe the program to address those specifically. As you can see, there's a link at the bottom. This will come up again later, so don't worry about it too much. But we have been putting all of the materials of the open incubators, all 3 versions, in an open science framework repository, so you can go and copy and reuse, and please do. More detail about the program. The concept here is that we work, we accept a small cohort. I think our first was the largest, that was 8. The second was 4. The 3rd was 5, sort of, but Kelsey's team threw our numbers off because there were 3 of them and 2 of them were there. So small cohort is the idea, so that people can get to know each other. And you can see in the middle of the screen here that we intend to focus in these 3 areas, that we work with researchers from any stage of career on these 3 topics: effective project development, how to do research and scholarship communication in a new way, especially thinking through the lens of open, and then preparation for evaluation. We're working with people who are making new kinds of things, and that means that they will be evaluated in new ways. We want to talk to them about how to do that well from the outset of a project. A lot of the inspiration for the NCSU Open Incubator program came from a similar program that I and a colleague, Sarah Stanley at Florida State, launched, called Pen and Ink. You see on the left there, which was a same idea, small research cohort, working with them to develop a project from an idea to a proof of concept. And then after that, the library will decide its level of continued engagement. I've been really inspired by things like the digital documentation process, the Mozilla Open Leaders curriculum. So all of these sorts of things came together to create this program that we're calling the Open Incubator. This was the most significant change we made in the December, our 3rd cohort, December of last year. We had been remote in the spring, and that one went okay. There's a presentation in our Open Science Framework repo that describes that first switch to remote in the spring. The fall one, scheduling became the primary challenge. People were home, and it was coming up on the holidays and time off, and we had traditionally done these over 5 to 7 weeks, so about once a week for 2 or 2.5 hours at a time. It became clear that that wasn't going to be possible. So we said, could we accomplish an incubator in one afternoon, in a 4-hour, Zoom call. The stark difference you can see in the curriculum are the links at the bottom there. I think Kelsey have dropped in the chat, so you can kind of have those up and compare. This is what we would do if we had 5 whole weeks. This is what we attempted to do in 1 afternoon. And I'll hand it over to Scott here.
So with the open incubators across all the instances, there's some different themes that we're always trying to emphasize. And these are two of the themes that we emphasized a lot in this text analysis focused one, which is we want to try to be as open as possible in our scholarship and as closed as necessary. We understand that we're trying to be open to develop open interventions, but there are different restrictions on the type of research, whether that's on data or methods or sharing due to funding and many reasons. So we always try to push as open as possible, and we understand sometimes as close as necessary. And the other piece is that open interventions are possible at many points in the research lifecycle. It's not always the case that you can be open at every single stage in that scholarly lifecycle, but we can almost always find some moment during the research lifecycle where we can find some way to make things a little bit more open. And so sometimes we encourage this gradual process, try to find the opportunities and move forward as you can. The next slide. So when we're thinking about text analysis, particularly in how these two themes impacted this particular cohort and what we were trying to help people learn and understand, one of the big things is that high quality domain specific open text data is really hard to find. If you've done a lot of text analysis or supported a lot of text analysis projects, you might feel this one pretty strongly. A lot of different research projects require data from really specific narrow domains. It could be that you're working specifically on a certain subset of journals for your domain. Those are licensed and copyrighted in a very particular way with restrictions. It could be that you're wanting to work on really recent literary works. Recent literary works are under copyright. It's very difficult to do some of that type of analysis and then to actually release that underlying data or to find that data open with open access licenses. So the data itself is really difficult sometimes with text analysis for it to be all the way open. And so we had to ask, okay, for all the participants here, maybe you're not able to use non-open data. First, are you able to use open data? But if not, what are those other moments in your project or in your analysis where you might be able to have some sort of open intervention? We have Kelsey here who's going to participate, and she's going to speak for just a minute about the Franken project that her team brought to the incubator here.
Thank you, Scott. And so I have a unique experience in being both with the OKC with Scott and Micah and Will, but then also being a graduate student in the Communication, Rhetoric, and Digital Media program at NC State. And so my research team had this project, the Franken project, based off of Mary Shelley's text of Frankenstein. And we came to the Open Incubator, and we're very excited for this opportunity for scaffolded, guided engagement and working with data, especially coming from a field where there's not as much experience offered directly for that kind of support. And as Michelle was saying previously, it's so great to have kind of the opportunity to learn from other individuals that are going through the same process, even if there's no overlap necessarily in subject focus, but it's really valuable for that kind of cross-pollination in the workflow. And so our work was looking at text data specifically, looking through Frankenstein. And so through the Open Incubator, we were really interested in how we could work with the text in a different way.
So one of the other sort of big challenges with text analysis when we're trying to think about the issues around open and closed data or open and closed publications or scholarly work is that data and methods really constrain each other. This is the case, of course, in all areas of research, but in text analysis, it takes a particular form. And that's the case that a lot of open text data, which uses things like n-gram derivatives, really constrain the type of computational and analytical methods that are supported. So if you're not familiar with this idea of derivative data or extracted features, the HathiTrust Research Center's extracted features is a really great example of this. When we think about text data, we often think of these full sentences and paragraphs and so forth. One of the innovations that the HTRC really did is to create derivative data, which in this case is page by page counts of how many times each individual word appears on a page. And so when you get their extracted features, what you get is metadata typically in JSON format that has those counts of words, that has other information about where words appear on the page. And you can do a lot with this, and it means that you can have access computationally or for analysis to data, to texts that are still in copyright or that otherwise you couldn't get the access to. So JSTOR and Portico's newer platform Constellate, which I think is either still in beta or just came out of beta, has a very similar approach to a lot of the text data that JSTOR and Portico have. And so they provide the same type of n-gram level data. N-grams are just collections of words, either size 1, size 2, 1 word, 2 words, so forth. But one aspect of this, and this is fantastic for open research, but it does also mean that any types of analytical methods that would require the full sequence of words in a sentence so that you have syntax and grammar cannot really be accomplished using these types of derivative data or the extracted features. So sometimes when we have open data, that open data constrains the types of methods that we're actually able to use. And in the same way, some types of methods mean that you can't actually, that you have to have data with certain features. So things like named entity recognition, the most recent really high quality methods really require almost uncleaned full text data, full sentences, so that you're able to get the full context for the neural network model to actually work with that well. So one thing that we talked with our participants about is to try to understand what their research question is and what methods they think were going to be appropriate, and to understand what are the restrictions on their data based on those methods. Or if they do have open data or are really interested in using open data, how do they understand the ways that the structure of that data itself constrains the types of research methods or the types of questions that they're able to ask. This is part of a really, I thought, a great conversation that we had with all of our participant teams. The last little bit of this is in that sort of vein of open, as open as possible, and trying to find interventions. We talked with the folks who were looking at using closed data sources, again, for a lot of very good reasons, about whether they might be able to create open derivatives of their own in that vein of the HTRC extracted features or the Constellate approach. So if you are using these, can you still actually release open derivatives that other scholars would be able to use and take advantage of that work that you're already doing? Back to you, Micah.
Yeah, so here's our quick takeaways, and happy to roll this right into conversation. Everything that Scott just said, we tried to do in a 30-minute session with the four projects that we had coming from disciplines in education, biology, communication, rhetoric, digital media. There were 2 teams from that area, and applied ecology. So we had it felt like all we really got to was the potential for how text analysis could be played out through these projects. If we had more time, we would have dug really deep into those areas, and obviously Scott has just laid out many different directions we could have gone in. So our takeaways, distance and remote programming and in-depth training like this is possible. We did it in the spring of last year and then in the winter of last year. The thing that is really important to me about the Open Incubator is cohort development, and that takes time. So the 2 previous cohorts feel like there was a little gelling of the people. This text analysis one, we just didn't really get there because we had 4 hours on a Friday afternoon. I really like the idea of topically themed incubators because of that cross-disciplinarity that was possible. It's difficult to execute, but text analysis was one that we felt really confident about. We have an idea and haven't started planning yet for doing a similar topical themed incubator in this fall on the topic of data ethics. And need to underline that this program, the fall version especially, would have been totally impossible without our program coordinator, Claire Cahoon, who you see on the screen here. And then in the spring, Will and I were really lucky to have another colleague named Lainey Algebright, who was our coordinator for that session. So getting the materials together, coordinating the team that would be part of the incubator and the team that is the researchers that are joining us to do the projects has only been dependent on the coordination of our colleagues. So I'll say that our materials are there. There's the link again. Please do click through, make your own version of the program. Let us know how it goes. And we're happy to take any questions.
Thanks so much. This was a fantastic talk. So there's a question right now from Maris. Thanks, Maris, for all of your wonderful questions. Has there been follow-up with the remote participants to see if they've been able to apply what they've learned? Does the one-day training lead to an ongoing relationship?
Great question. And this is the airing of laundry and failure, share your failure. Brianna, we've done this before, right? No, there has been no follow-up, and that is totally my fault. The plan was that we would do follow-up. I think how we left it, we actually did a sort of assessment survey in the last part of those 4 hours and said, when would be the best time to follow up with you? Within 4 weeks, within 4 months, within a year, something like that. And life shifted, things moved on, and we have not reached back out to them. Luckily, we're still connected to 2 of the projects, and Kelsey happens to work in our office, two other projects and Kelsey through other ways, but we haven't gotten back around to the text analysis part of those projects. The concept, Maris, was, yeah, that if we have to shove all this into an afternoon, that the one-day training would be only the beginning. That's the launch pad for all the other relationships that we might have with those projects over time. Scott and Kelsey, anything to add on that one?
A couple of the projects had already ended up in consultations with me just on the text analysis methods. And then one of those did lead to later conversations, though more about GitHub and Git and pedagogy, or like the use of Git in pedagogical situations. So not so much follow-ups on the text analysis, but there was a little bit before and a little bit after on a couple of the projects.
We've got a few more questions, including one from Devin. Did the participants look to the libraries to help with sharing or disseminating the outputs that they created in cases where that was possible? If so, what did you do to help them with that?
Yeah, great question, Devin. I'll say the answer is not really, because the goal of the Open Incubator program is to go from an idea to a proof of concept. So the proof of concepts aren't always the thing that would be shared. The closest we got to that, I think, was actually the first round of the Open Incubator, where we did it over 7 weeks. So we had a lot more time to develop relationships with people. I have one output at the top of my head. There was a text analysis project. Jamie Haar, our colleague in CR, Communication, Rhetoric, and Digital Media, doing I'm going to forget all the details. Anyway, the outcome of his project was a data model, basically, for understanding networked relationships in French history, something or other. And so the outcome was, and he came to us and asked directly, where should I put this? And I recommended Humanities Commons. So he now has his data model for this project with a DOI referenceable on Humanities Commons. That's the clearest one. Some of the others that we've worked with over the 3 incubators come back regularly with those kinds of questions. So there's a couple of OER projects that we're in constant conversation with. And eventually, I assume those will become an OER that we can point to and say, it started at the incubator, and over a year and a half, it became a thing to point to. Scott or Kelsey, add on that one? Will, also, I know you're lurking back there somewhere.
I know my research group talks a lot about how when it comes time to share and disseminate our project, the libraries would be a great point of contact to talk to about local displays and sharing with our local university community. So those conversations do happen, at least on our side, which is great because there is, through the Open Incubator, you just kind of get to dip your toes in the beginning of the giant library network system.
All right, and we have another question as well in the chat. Would you consider something between these 2 timeframes? Not as long as 5 weeks, but maybe more than 1 4-hour session, maybe 1 long session, then a week or 2 away to work, and then a second long session. Michelle has some ideas for you.
Yeah. The cool thing about the Open Incubator, and Will, I do want you to jump in on the pedagogy one here in a second. The cool thing about the incubator is that we set it up as a flexible model. So every time we've run the open incubator 3 times, and every single time it has been different, based on, length of session, activities that we do for each session, length of the entire program has been different. So Michelle, the answer is yes. We sort of are always adapting the program to consider the best way to do it. Personally, I think that I would rather do longer relationships, because the thing that I'm really interested in the incubator is not the project work, but the community building. And that happens over, a semester of something like this with people really committed, that would light my fire. But Will has taken the incubator model and adopted it a little wider. So go ahead, Will.
Thanks, Micah. I'm dropping some stuff in chat here so it's available, and I'll show my smiling face too. So one of the things I really love about the incubator is the way it's extensible, as Micah has said. And so because I spend a lot of my time thinking about open educational practices and open pedagogy and that sort of thing, and because we have an amazing set of people across the libraries who think about that in different ways, we've put together this team of 5 or 6 different people who have worked together to develop an incubator that's focused specifically on open pedagogical practices, and sort of a mix of what are the tools for that and what are the values that are sort of explicitly highlighted in that as well. I've shared a quick library story about one of our first alums who's done some really good work. I've shared the basic page that has some information, and I've shared our OSF site with the resources as well. If I'm not careful, I'll keep talking about that for the next hour, so I'm going to shut up now. I'll share a couple more resources in chat, and I'm happy to answer questions.
Yeah, and the key point there is that the Open Pedagogy Incubator is semester long, right? Or spread over more time than a semester. Is that right, Will?
It is. We had pre-pandemic dreams about different schedules as well, but the first one started in March of last year, and so we basically just stretched it out over the academic year. This year we're doing the same thing. We started in the spring and are just going to make it a spring through the mid-fall, with the intention that you'll implement your new open interventions in the following spring semester.
Yeah, this is really exciting, and it's giving me a lot to think about. So I also want to, I said thank you in the chat, but thank you for making all of these materials openly available and really, walking the talk. That's much appreciated. We certainly don't need to be recreating the wheel when we have colleagues who are, experimenting and trying out different approaches. So I appreciate that. And one of the things that is sticking with me is your themes, these themes that you outlined, as open as possible, as closed as necessary. And the theme that I can't remember, but it's about open interventions. Those are the things that are sticking with me as I'm thinking about your presentation. And I would love to hear a little bit more about how you incorporated those into the cohort. I mean, are those sort of your reflections as you're thinking about conversations that have been had, or is that part of the scaffolding for the way that you've constructed the cohort experience? I'd love to hear, maybe there's an interplay there. I'd love to hear some of your reflections on that.
Yeah, I'll start on, Scott, go ahead. I was going to mention open interventions, but you start, go ahead.
I was going to say that at a basic level, they're super upfront themes and things that we say to the people very early on. In part to frame what we're trying to do, which is to make it possible to do this work gradually, and for it to be okay to make it open when and where you can, and to not feel bad about it being closed when you can't make it open. So they're very explicit sort of guiding points for all of the conversations that occur. And Micah?
Yeah, and that's a great question, Brianna. And echoing what Scott said, we think of that as over and under and throughout all of the program. I put in the chat that the first discussion that we do with every cohort is a discussion of open principles versus open practices, and where a principle may connect with a practice that'll be different for each discipline. the idea of open intervention, Scott kind of teased this out in the presentation, is that I think a lot of people come to the concept of open research and say, oh, that means that I must publish everything I do open access, or my classroom should be entirely flipped to an open pedagogy. And we want to soften that a little bit and say that these are goals that we can aim toward achieving, and in the program we're here to help you identify where where your step toward that goal is. So maybe it's not publishing full open access for the rest of your life, but you could do a preprint, and your discipline already has made that very clear that it's moving that direction, or your data may not be fully available, but is there, like Scott mentioned, a way that some of that process or the code that you're going to use on that data could be made available. So we're open interventions, and yeah, open as possible, as closed as necessary. I think we covered it. Wheeler, Kelsey?
Yeah, I'll just say, and I think in all the incubators, thinking about giving agency to the participants, that this isn't a, you're gonna shut up and we're gonna tell you what open looks like. It is, this is the stuff we thought would be interesting to talk about. Sound good? Anything missing? And every time we have that conversation, there's an explicit sort of sharing of authority and collective building in that way. And that's open pedagogy in a nutshell, right? So it's easy for us to do.
Yeah, it's a very inviting framing and also very useful and practical. So I appreciate that. Any last questions for our presenters? All right, well, it seems that we have come to our conclusion. So I would love to thank all of our presenters today for taking the time to share their ideas with us. Again, we are a structure, and hopefully we're a conduit where we can be sharing information about open research, but that's really reliant upon everyone's willingness to participate and engage. So we certainly appreciate everyone showing up today, especially when we're probably all tired of screens. So thank you to our presenters. Thank you to our participants. We will be posting this so that it's available for anyone to watch at a later time. So thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful day.
Take care. Good to see you all. Bye, Devin.